49ers fans, lock in because this is not some normal offseason and it sure does not feel like a team getting ready to just hang around and hope for the best. This feels like a team staring straight at the Super Bowl window and saying, right now, right here, no more excuses, no more waiting, no more soft talk. The Niners are moving like a franchise that knows exactly what time it is. Mike Evans is in the building. Christian Kirk is in the building. The defense got fresh bodies. The trenches are still under the microscope. And the pressure? Oh, the pressure is through the roof now. That is what makes this whole thing so fascinating because every move San Francisco has made so far screams the same message. This team is not trying to stay relevant. This team is trying to finish the job. And let's start with the biggest punch to the league's attention span because the Mike Evans move changed the temperature immediately. You do not bring in a receiver like that on a 3-year deal if you are still trying to figure out who you are. You do not make that kind of swing if you are rebuilding. That is a contender move, plain and simple. That is a front office looking at Brock Purdy, looking at George Kittle, looking at Trent Williams, looking at the bones of this roster and saying, we are too close to play scared. Evans gives this offense weight. He gives it presence. He gives it real WR1 gravity. And when you stack that on top of the other moves, Christian Kirk, Dre Greenlaw, Nate Hobbs, Osa Odigizua, Vidarian Lowe, Corliss Waitman, Luke Gifford, now we are not talking about one splashy headline anymore. Now we are talking about a full-blown roster signal. That is the part people around the league better understand. This was not random shopping. This was targeted. This was calculated. This was a team going down the roster and attacking real needs without acting like the window will stay open forever. And that is why the pressure has gone up, not down. Because once you make these moves, once you bring in proven veterans, once you strengthen key rooms on both sides of the ball, the standard changes. At that point, nobody wants to hear about seeing how it develops. Nobody wants to hear about moral victories. Nobody wants to hear about being competitive. You are either building toward a Lombardi or you are wasting a roster that is good enough to demand more. That is what jumps out to me the most. San Francisco did not spend this first wave of free agency like a team looking for comfort. They spent it like a team looking for answers. And that matters because in the NFC, if you want to stay on top, you cannot show up in September with obvious weaknesses and act surprised when they get exposed in January. The Niners know that. They know what this conference asks of you. They know what the expectations are in that building. They know that when you carry this kind of talent, the conversation is not, can they compete? The conversation is, why have they not finished it yet? But here is where it gets even more interesting because even after all these moves, San Francisco still has pressure points. They still have spots on this roster that cannot be ignored if the mission is truly championship or bust. One of those spots? Left guard. And that is exactly why the Greg Van Roten buzz makes football sense, even if it is not the kind of move that breaks the internet. No official confirmation, no fake reporting, no pretending a deal is already done. But from a pure football angle? Come on, you can see it. Veteran, experienced, versatile, affordable. The kind of player serious teams quietly add when they are trying to tighten every bolt before the season starts. And that matters more than people want to admit, because real contenders do not just chase stars, they eliminate leaks. They do not just win the press conference, they protect the pocket, stabilize the interior, and make sure one obvious weakness does not hijack the whole operation. If left guard is still one of the biggest concerns on this roster, then walking into the draft without addressing it at all feels risky. Why? Because then the board starts controlling you. Then your need becomes too obvious. Then everybody knows what you are hunting. The best-run teams do not like being cornered like that. They want freedom. They want flexibility. They want a draft from strength, not desperation. So if the Niners do pivot toward a veteran like Van Roten, that would not be some boring depth move. That would be another tell. Another sign that this front office understands the assignment. Another reminder that championship teams are built in the shadows as much as they are built in the spotlight. Everybody sees the fireworks. Not everybody notices the wiring behind the stage. But in January, oh, you notice. You absolutely notice. And then there is the culture piece, the part that turns a good roster into a destination. George Kittle pulled the curtain back a little when he talked about what he told Mike Evans, and honestly, that might be one of the most revealing parts of this whole offseason. He talked about how the organization takes care of players, how it invests back into the team, how the facility is run, how they travel, how the day-to-day environment reflects a franchise trying to operate at the highest level. That is not fluff. That is not PR wallpaper. That is infrastructure. That is credibility. That is what happens when a respected veteran can sell another respected veteran on the idea that this place is built the right way. And you know what that means? It means the 49ers are not just selling a playbook. They are selling a standard. They are selling a contender's ecosystem. That is huge, because free agents do not only choose money, they choose opportunity, they choose structure, they choose belief, they choose the feeling that if they walk into your building, they are stepping into something serious, something organized, something that can actually carry them into the kind of football that matters most. And when Kittle becomes that kind of messenger for your franchise, the effect is real. Players listen to players, especially players who have lived it. Now let me be clear, because this cuts both ways. A strong culture does not lower pressure, it raises it. When the team treats players well, when the owner invests, when the veterans recruit, when the roster gets upgrades, when the whole machine looks polished and loaded, the margin for excuses disappears. At that point, fans do not want to hear about how nice the setup is. They want to know if all that excellence is going to end with a parade. That is the deal. That is the bargain. If you are going to operate like an elite franchise, then eventually you have to cash that in at the biggest moment. And speaking of real pressure, let's talk about Christian Kirk, because I think some people are missing why this move matters. No, it does not have the same star power as Mike Evans. No, it is not the move that will dominate every graphic. But for a team with championship expectations, this kind of addition can be massive. Kirk gives the offense more reliability, more veteran depth, more protection against the chaos of a long season. Because that is what contenders think about. They think about what happens when the first plan gets tested. They think about what happens if somebody misses time. They think about what happens if young players are not ready to carry meaningful snaps in big games. And that is where the move really hits. Before Kirk got there, you could look at that receiver room and still feel a little uneasy behind the top names. Evans and Ricky Pearsall give you excitement, sure. But there are questions, there is injury history, there is uncertainty, and behind them you are talking about younger players who just have not shown enough yet because of injuries and limited reps. Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins. There may be talent there, but talent and trust are not the same thing, especially on a team trying to win right now. Kirk gives San Francisco a layer of insurance. He lowers the risk profile of the room, and that is a very big deal for a team that cannot afford to drift. Now, does that make life tougher for the younger receivers? Absolutely. No sugarcoating it. Their path just got steeper. Their margin just got thinner. And if the Niners still draft another wide receiver somewhere down the line, then the competition gets even nastier. That is the business. That is the reality of a contender. Hope is not a roster plan. Potential is not a guarantee. If you want snaps on a team with this much pressure, you have to take them. You may have to earn your way through special teams. You may have to prove you belong in the ugly parts before you get trusted in the shiny parts. That is how it works when the stakes are real. But from the fan side, it is hard to hate the logic. Because what are the Niners supposed to do? Sit back and cross their fingers? That is not how title-chasing teams operate. They build for durability. They build for stress. They build for the moment when the season gets weird, when bodies get banged up, when the easy version of the plan disappears, and the depth chart has to answer hard questions. Christian Kirk helps answer those questions before they become a weekly panic. And all of this circles back to the same truth. The 49ers are behaving like a team that knows the clock is ticking on an opportunity too good to waste. They are not acting scared. They are not acting passive. They are not acting like pretty good is enough. They are trying to raise the ceiling and patch the floor at the same time. That is why Evans matters. That is why Kirk matters. That is why the culture matters. That is why a possible veteran guard addition matters. That is why the unfinished conversation around edge depth still matters too. Because when you are this close, every detail starts to feel heavier. Every move starts to carry playoff weight. So here's the question for every 49ers fan watching this right now. Are you seeing a roster that is truly ready to go hunt a Super Bowl? Or do you still believe one more move is needed to turn all this pressure into a championship breakthrough? Drop it in the comments. I want the real answer. No fence sitting. No soft takes. If you believe this front office is building a monster, say it loud. If you think there is still one glaring hole that could wreck the dream, call it out. Share this with another Niners fan, because this debate is only getting hotter. And remember this, what is happening in Santa Clara right now does not feel small, it does not feel random, and it definitely does not feel safe. It feels urgent. It feels ambitious. It feels like a franchise loading up, staring down the pressure, and daring the rest of the league to stop it.